I think when we're first in touch with technologies that really help us on the day-to-day life or are just very interesting, our first reaction doesn't tend to be, wait a minute, why they are doing this, right? We just get mesmerized by things that we didn't know were possible before.
The magic of technology.
Exactly.
Bianca, thanks very much for being part of the panel yesterday. So we were exploring, weren't we, the Sustainable Development Goals and how they apply to architecture. So beyond technology and cost and functionality, what are the things that architects need to be thinking about as we kind of go into the recovery that's ahead of us? We had a really interesting conversation, didn't we, on kind of the darker side of digital and sort of social media and that sort of side of things. What did you not get a chance to say, because we obviously didn't have much time because there was quite a few of us on the panel, about social media and the impact perhaps that technology has on people?
Great. I think the big point that we touched very little was how it's much easier to work around these conscious choices of architects if these things are embedded in the model since the beginning. So for those of us who watch the social dilemma,
Mm-hmm.
they can easily relate to that when they see all the people who invented that infinite rolling of information say, I truly regret it. And now I am aware of the bad behaviors that this causes, especially on young people.
Right.
But the point is much harder to fix it once it's embedded in the model of the business from the beginning. So it's the case we have with Facebook. Facebook sells your data. It's embedded in their business model. This is how they make money. How do they fix it now
Mm-hmm.
that users know how they use their data and they're pretty upset about it? It's a really big and difficult issue to sort now.
It is possible for these big tech companies to pivot, but I do get what you're saying, that to unpick the business model is the hardest part. And as architects and innovators, we can help kind of guide the business, but we ultimately can't, in many cases, fundamentally rip up the rule book, like you say, and start again, can we? So, but that said, we were having an interesting conversation just now about how, just because something's been done a certain way doesn't mean, what your kind of thoughts on trying to get the business and stakeholders to kind of see things a different way?
I think this perspective is already picking up from different angles. Like we said, both the customers and the shareholders starting to understand that some certain things may pay off profits on the short term, but on the
Yeah.
long term, they might really come to bite you.
I've been reflecting on the conversations we had yesterday, and what I've been thinking is, it's almost like some technology companies or some platforms have not necessarily exploited users, but have leveraged kind of human psychology and perhaps in some cases it's laziness or it's just our innate kind of traits to kind of keep us hooked on the platform. And that works up until the point that perhaps the lid is sort of lifted up and people sort of see that that's happening and people go, oh, hang on, this algorithm is keeping people hooked, or it's to your point that you've been making to me before, it's selling the data or whatever it might be. It's kind of, do you think essentially it's a bit of an arms race between the technology companies and kind of consumers? Once consumers find out, the tech companies then have to do the next thing to kind of keep us hooked or make money?
I think when we're first in touch with technologies that really help us on the day-to-day life or are just very interesting, our first reaction doesn't tend to be, wait a minute, why they are doing this, right? We just get mesmerized by things that we didn't know were possible before.
The magic of technology.
Exactly. Like Chris said in the panel yesterday, okay, you see, like Google is telling you that you need to rush out to the airport now, otherwise you're going to lose your flight because it's been anticipated. And you didn't know that. You didn't know these things were possible before. So we are just enchanted. There is a famous sentence from Hannah Arendt, actually, the philosopher, that she says, everything that touches human lives gets us inherently dependent from it. And I think it ties up to the whole social media thing that yes, we didn't know it was possible. It's super interesting. It's designed by psychologists to keep you interested and keep you hooked to it. So we didn't tend to question it in advance. Is it good for me or is it bad for me? And I think it's reflections that come to consumers later on in terms of how should you consume it. I think now we're starting to think, okay, there is a good and bad side to this. But I think also because consumers develop this awareness, and many of these companies' founders are actually coming up to say to us, this wasn't actually developed in the most ethical way.
Mm.
So now we know
On
it.
reflection, maybe this wasn't the best of ideas.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I think now that we clearly know it, and we know it from people who are involved in the design of these features, uh, we have our second thoughts. I remember hearing from a designer of Apple, a former designer, saying how you can turn your phone, telling you how you can make your phone less addictive. One of the things was just turn off the colors. He has his phone in black and white because the colors are designed by psychologists to also hook you, to
Yep.
also take your interest.
Wow.
So it's very difficult, and it basically has several effects on how people manage their time, how they don't decide to consume that technology on the way it's being consumed. It's more the technology is driving you than you are making use of it.
And it's interesting because our panel was about conscious architectural choices, but actually it's probably as much about architects and system designers to make sure that they're allowing their users to be conscious of the decisions that they're making. Because I think you're right. I think there are a number of things like, ironically, given the social dilemma was on Netflix, one of the things Netflix does is the autoplay feature, which I think for binge watching and for sleep deprivation, it's a really bad thing because you may not have consciously chosen to watch the next episode, but if it's automatically played and you have to actively stop it or cancel it, that for
Exactly.
me, it just feels like that's kind of designed against the user in some cases. That may be convenient if you do want to binge watch, but if it's like midnight or 1 a.m. and you probably should have gone to bed like an hour or 2 hours ago, and I'm of course not speaking from experience here at all. It's
Friend
kind
of
of
mine, right?
it's not a good thing, right? Maybe it's okay if it's a Friday, but if it's like Wednesday night and you've got an important sort of working day the following day, it's not great, is it? So yeah, I think it's really interesting, isn't it, to see these kind of technologists come out and say maybe we shouldn't have done it that way, or if we'd have known the implications of that, we would have done differently. But I wanted to kind of ask you, what do you think that the wider population is actually aware of? Do you think it's a small group of us who are kind of aware of this, the impact tech has on our lives, or do you think it's quite a small group and it's growing? What's your kind of take?
I think there are different levels of awareness.
Yeah.
Some things might be just pure observation. I don't know. Our grandparents might look at the young children now and think, well, there's something wrong with them. They sit around each other with their phones, but they don't talk, right? That's just mere observation. They don't need anybody to tell them that these things were designed to
Yeah.
basically get you addicted to it, and they are addicted to it. And of course, at another level are the people who actually understand how these things were designed to hook our behavior, to keep us always consuming the technology. So I think there are different levels of awareness, and in different regions of the globe as well. In places where internet connection might not necessarily be stable or widely available, maybe there is not as much addiction yet. Maybe it's still something interesting and new and quite inoffensive in the beginning. So I think it's just a bit disparate.
Mm-hmm.
But it's quite interesting also how, because these things became so addictive, we're starting to develop things to control it. So lots of friends talk about, I don't know, extensions you can install to stop Amazon from like letting you buy on the first click, because it might just be an instinctive thing. I
Yeah.
don't know, you clicking, you saw it was interesting, then buy and you regret it. And other things that it just lock your phone and don't allow you to use for a couple of hours. So I think the mere fact that we need all these tools to stop us from consuming the technology the way the technology wants us to consume it.
So it's almost technology versus technology in some cases.
Exactly. It makes very clear that the design decision wasn't necessarily the greatest,
It's,
having the user in mind.
it's interesting, isn't it? Almost maybe an extension of Alexa in the future will be something that kind of looks out for you. Maybe there's an area of innovation here that's almost like personal defense technology. That's like, oh, I've looked at your phone settings and I'm going to turn off all your notifications, or other than email, I'm going to and text messaging, I'm going to turn off like WhatsApp, I'm going to turn off Instagram, and you're going to have to actively choose when you want to do that, because that's something I've done. I kind of read a bunch of things about how to kind of not be so enslaved to the technology, and a lot of it was that. So yeah, no, really, really interesting.